Did the Beatles invent rap? Now I know what you're thinking. This is pretty bizarre. How could the Beatles have invented rap? Well, there may be some pieces of evidence in here that may shock you. So first we have to define what rap is. This is going to be a more simplistic explanation of it, but rap in itself is rhythmic speaking. And oftentimes when we think of hip-hop, there can be sampling sounds, media, etc. into a song. And there oftentimes can be storytelling of fictional or real events. And sometimes there can be characterizations or dramatizations of oneself, like the artist, or another person. Now what I mean by characterizations, let's think about it like this. Oftentimes artists like to put on this persona of themselves. The Beatles did this when they had the Sgt. Pepper album. They sort of did like this gimmick where they were this made-up band. And you know, when we get down to dramatization of oneself or others, I think it's pretty plain and simple. You're making like a person or a situation more dramatic than it actually is. You're like sensationalizing an event or a person. Now this is an interesting one. Often defying the mainstream culture. Now I know it's easy to think today, the Beatles don't seem like they define the mainstream culture. Well actually back then, the older generations didn't really approve of the Beatles. Even though they were coming out dressed up in suits, being all sophisticated. Believe it or not, when they sang songs like I Want to Hold Your Hand, there were people who found songs like I Want to Hold Your Hand to be provocative, if you know where I'm going with this. You see, typically you're going to have that crowd of people who are going to say, like no matter what the artist is, they're going to say, oh, you know, this is the devil's music, you shouldn't listen to this music, which is what happened. And you know, we are going to get to that one statement that John Lennon made. Don't worry. And of course, that also falls into the vulgar topics. Now, I have talked about this before, which I think it's pretty clear that a good majority of rap music does have vulgar topics in it. But you're also going to ask the question, do the Beatles' music have vulgar topics in them? Well, yes. There are songs by the Beatles that have what you could consider to be vulgar topics. Let's take Happiness is a Warm Gun, for example. You see, this is a song about a person who feels happy when they have a gun in their hands and they enjoy shooting it. Now, granted, there's not any violence towards any individual in the song, but the song could be interpreted as violent. But if you want to go even further than that, we could look at a song like Rocky Raccoon, where there is an actual part in the song where a person gets shot. Rocky Raccoon, the song, kind of takes place in like, I suppose, the Old West. It's kind of like about like this gunsling battle, you know. And that could be interpreted as, I suppose, vulgar. And those are just a few examples. Now, does rap music have to be vulgar? No, of course it doesn't. But I'm just saying that can be the case a lot of the time. Now, of course, before we talk more about the Beatles, we have to acknowledge the credited founder of rap. This is DJ Kool Herc. His music career began in 1973, and he is still currently a musician. We're going to ask the question, did DJ Kool Herc really invent rap? More so, we're going to ask the question, why do people think DJ Kool Herc invented rap? Well, in the 1970s, DJ Kool Herc threw parties, and he was a DJ for those parties. He mixed funk tracks together in the 1970s, and people have credited him for creating the instrumental idea of what hip-hop is, what rap is. Now, it's important to note here that he is not a vocalist, but he is an instrumental artist. I'll say this later in the video, but I'm going to say it here, that you don't have to be a vocal artist to invent a genre of music. As you can see through other times that there are people like composers who can write songs for people, and those people, they perform those songs, you know, like with musicals, music soundtracks, things like that. So I'm not saying you have to have the ability to do that. There's been this video that I have seen a few times. It's a pretty good song. This is what people have been labeling as the first recorded rap song. This is a song called Noah by the Jubalaires. Now, if you don't know the Jubalaires, they were an American gospel group. Their career ran between 1935 and 1961. People believe that this is the first recorded rap song because the way that this is performed is similar to what we know as rap today. Now, obviously, I can't play this song, copyright reasons, obvious reasons. I will leave a link in the description so you can listen to this song yourself. The song Noah by the Jubalaires was released in 1944, way before the supposed invention of rap. Do I personally believe that this is the first recorded rap song? I would have to say that one song is not enough evidence to say that the Jubalaires invented rap. And I don't believe that it was their intention to create rap, considering the fact that they were a singing group primarily. Now let's talk a little bit more about the Beatles. The Beatles' career began in 1960 and they broke up in 1970. So what do we know from that? Well, this means that their career predates DJ Kool Herc's career. Very interesting. Now, as we remember, DJ Kool Herc didn't even start his career until the early 1970s. The Beatles consisted of 4 members: John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. John Lennon was the founder. They were all musicians and they were all able to sing, meaning that they were all vocal artists, which also means that they all could have invented rap. You see where I'm going with this? They all could have had the vocal ability to create rap, considering the fact that they were vocal artists. Now, if you just hear me out on this, I'm not saying that you have to be a professional vocal artist to invent rap, to be able to invent rap, or to be able to invent a genre of music. You don't have to be in the professional scene. But what I am saying is that this is a possibility. And being in the professional scene can definitely give you more credibility. So let's talk about the Beatles and DJ Kool Herc. How can we compare them? Well, as I said, the Beatles' career began in 1960. DJ Kool Herc's career began in 1973. That is a very big difference. And as I also said, the Beatles' career ended in 1970. DJ Kool Herc's career began in 1973. The Beatles' career began over a decade before DJ Kool Herc's career began in 1973. So what do we take from this information? It suggests that the Beatles might have influenced DJ Kool Herc. So you know what that means, don't you? It means that there is a possibility that the Beatles might actually be the inventors of rap. They were active in the business for an entire decade before DJ Kool Herc's career began. What do we know about the Beatles and black culture? Well, we do know that the Beatles were inspired by black artists. Considering the fact that the Beatles were younger in the 1950s and they were getting prepared to be in the professional scene in the 1950s, it was probably their aspiration to be professional musicians around that time. And in the 1950s, the rock and roll genre had more prominent black artists. But you're probably going to ask the question, what black artists were the Beatles inspired by? Well, one example I could give you is Chuck Berry. And the Beatles also popularized the rock and roll genre, which obviously again originated from black musicians. Now, this is something that people might not realize, but rock and roll as a genre was invented by black artists. Did the Beatles go into the rock and roll genre because they wanted to be like black people? No, obviously not. I think it's pretty clear that the Beatles have a passion for music, and that's why they wanted to be musicians, and that's why they wanted to be rock and roll musicians. You know, it's not like the Beatles were sitting around thinking, oh yeah, you know, let's be cool like the black guys. Let's go into the rock and roll genre so we can be cool like the black guys. No. So the Beatles also covered songs by black artists, like Twist and Shout by the Isley Brothers, right here as you can see. That's another thing people might not realize either, is that Twist and Shout, one of the Beatles' most popular songs, is a cover song that they covered from the Isley Brothers. And the Beatles also did collaborate with black artists, like Billy Preston, during their Let It Be sessions. And this is also a very important one. The Beatles refused to allow their audience to be segregated. Now, when segregation was still a thing, the Beatles refused to play until, I guess, the stadiums would integrate their audience by their race. So I think it's pretty clear that the Beatles cared about black culture and black people. Now let's talk a little bit more about the Beatles and their possible connection to their invention of rap. So it's important to note that the Beatles were primarily a rock and roll band. I'm not sure what other kind of band that they could be categorized as. They obviously did other songs. They did country songs, and they did songs for musicals. They did Till There Was You from The Music Man, and they got a bit more experimental during their final years, like with Sgt. Pepper and Abbey Road and the White Album, obviously. They do have songs with rhythmic speaking, sampling, and all of those kinds of things that we see in rap and hip-hop today. But if you want to hear that, I would say, obviously, listen to their later albums. And once again, their career does predate DJ Kool Herc's career. Some examples of songs by the Beatles that may resemble rap as we know it today may include Rocky Raccoon, Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, and Tomorrow Never Knows, just to name a few. Rocky Raccoon, as I mentioned earlier, that was the one about, the Western, sort of gunslinging battle, and it does have the rhythmic speaking in it. Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, that is a more experimental, psychedelic sounding song, similar to Tomorrow Never Knows. The Beatles, they were experimental. They like to try new things. So, I know I did mention the song Happiness is a Warm Gun, but I'm gonna have to say that that doesn't really resemble rap. I would say it more falls under the category of a rock song. Now, this is gonna be a bit of a controversial one, but we do have to discuss the deeper meanings of rap. And there aren't pictures on this slide for a good reason, and I think you know why that reason is if you can read what's on the slide. Alright, so let's not sugarcoat it, let's talk about it. The Illuminati. Is there any way to get famous without joining the Illuminati? Well, the answer is yes and no. What does the Illuminati have to do with rap? Are you seriously asking that question? The Illuminati is basically involved in everything. I mean, come on, let's be real. You don't want to have a career, you don't want to have millions of dollars and have everything, be world famous. Okay, I guess you won't be joining the Illuminati then. But if you do want to get famous, if you do want to be the greatest band of all time, if you do want to be the greatest rapper of all time, if you do want to be the greatest of all time, if you do want to be the greatest anything of all time, if you do want to be great at anything of all time, just join the Illuminati. It's that simple. How do you do it? Well, it's a tough question. I don't know, maybe they'll talk to me one day if I get enough attention or something. Who knows? But yeah, do I think the Beatles were in the Illuminati? Probably. If there's someone out there who's like that level of famous, you can probably assume that they are in the Illuminati. So yeah, I was talking about the vulgar messages. The Beatles did have vulgar messages in their songs. Sort of, like I said. Like with Happiness is a Warm Gun and Rocky Raccoon. I said it earlier in the video and I don't really think I need to repeat it again. And as far as rap goes, I mean, it's all over the place. Now, I'm not going to say every single rap song promotes vulgar messages, but does it matter to me? I mean, not necessarily. I mean, like, I'm an adult. I can choose what I listen to. It's just music. Now, this is interesting. Sacrifices. Now, there's a lot of conspiracies out there about famous people having to make sacrifices of someone else. Like literally sacrificing a person to become famous. Which ties back to the Illuminati. It's the Illuminati making them do that. What am I really saying here though? Well, what I'm saying is, if you want to get to that level, you gotta do it. Now I know what you're thinking, you're just looking at me like I'm crazy, and saying, oh no, that's not true, it's not true, they wouldn't do that, they're harmless. The Beatles wouldn't make sacrifices, would they? I believe it was around 1966. There was this conspiracy going around that Paul McCartney had died in a car crash and was replaced with a lookalike. And there was a lot of symbolism in the Beatles albums that had released. You know how Paul had his feet barefoot and it looked like John Lennon was like an angel and George Harrison was like an undertaker and I don't know, Ringo was just there, you know, being Ringo or something. And then of course we have on the Sgt. Pepper album, we can see that there is a person with their hand above Paul McCartney's head. Apparently when somebody has their hand above someone else's head, that is supposedly symbolism that that person has died, or a symbolism of death or something like that. I don't know, that's a pretty big reach. And they were also like looking for like symbolism in like the lyrics of the songs. Like at the end of Strawberry Fields, people were speculating, did John Lennon say, I buried Paul? But John Lennon, I think he came out and said, no, it was cranberry sauce. I think the Beatles eventually caught wind of this and they decided to just start messing with people. Now, this last topic is probably going to be the most controversial, but we do have to talk about it. Anti-religion. And when I say anti-religion, I mean Satanism. Promoting satanic messages in your music. Now, do you have to do that to be a rapper? No, of course not. Nobody's forcing you to promote any kind of messaging in your music. That is, if you don't want to be famous. I mean, like, the pop stars and the rappers that we see today, like, they don't even try to hide it. They don't even try to hide the satanic messaging. Do I care? I mean, yeah, a little bit. Because, I mean, like, these are the people that are, like, the most famous people that we see. But is the choices of some musician gonna affect my life? No, not really. I mean, if you want to be a Satanist, be a Satanist. I mean, you're the one going to hell, not me. So what about the Beatles? Did they promote any kind of satanic messaging? Well, let's start with this. John Lennon once said that the Beatles were bigger than Jesus. And so this caused a lot of people to get angry, and they started taking the Beatles albums and burning them. But to me it didn't really matter because, you can really do whatever you want to art as long as the artist gets paid. It doesn't really matter. You can deface art, you can damage art, you can destroy it. As long as the artist gets paid, it doesn't really matter. So in the end, the Beatles were just making more money off of that. The people buying the albums and burning them. And those people were just wasting money by buying the albums and burning them. Now keep in mind that this was John Lennon alone who said this. I'm sure there were other members of the Beatles who did not feel the same way as he did. But I do want to add in here and say that John Lennon did later apologize for his comments. Now, as far as the Beatles promoting any satanic messaging in their music, I have not personally found any evidence of that. Now, of course, there may have been people at the time who viewed them as satanic, and there may still be people today who view them as satanic. So I think it's time to finally wrap this up. The conclusion. The Beatles may have inspired DJ Kool Herc, but they didn't intend to invent rap. DJ Kool Herc may be credited as the founder of rap, but crediting a singular person is questionable. And we also have to note that DJ Kool Herc was a DJ. He was not a vocal artist. Now, I'm not saying that you have to be a vocal artist to create a genre of music. And it's also important to note that music genres evolve over time, which is what I've pointed out throughout this presentation. Like I said from the beginning, that there was that one song, Noah by the Jubalaires, which people have said could be the first rap song. And as I said, the Beatles may have inspired DJ Kool Herc because the Beatles do have songs that sound similar to what we know as rap today. And what I'm also suggesting here is that rap may be more of an evolved genre, not something founded by one person. As I said up here, crediting a singular person for an entire genre of music, it is questionable. So what's my opinion on this, you might ask? No, I don't think the Beatles invented rap. And I'm not exactly sure that DJ Kool Herc invented rap either. I'm not going to discredit any of these artists for their contributions. I think the history of rap is too obscure because there are too many contributions and too many variables to consider. I think the history goes beyond that. I think the history goes beyond just one person. I mean, Paul and Ringo are still alive today. We could probably ask them. Maybe we could reach out to them. Maybe just send an email. See if that'll go through. Maybe see if they'll get back to where he once belonged. Okay, well, that was my presentation asking the question, did the Beatles invent rap? Let me know what you thought about this presentation. Do you think the Beatles invented rap? Do you think it's a possibility? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. Or leave a dislike. It doesn't really matter to me. I've lost all sense of emotion and feeling. So, with that being said, I'll see you next upload.